You already know the feeling. Deadlines tomorrow. Inbox won't stop refreshing. Your chest feels tight before you've even opened your eyes. And then, almost on cue, your stomach joins the party. Cramping, nausea, that weird, urgent need to run to the bathroom right before something important, or the opposite. Everything just stops, bloated, backed up, uncomfortable for days. You tell yourself it's just nerves. But here's the question almost nobody asks. What if stress isn't just something you feel? What if it's something that's physically rearranging what's living inside your gut right now while you're reading this? Last time on Gut Whispers, we talked about food. What to eat, what to add, what quietly works against you. A lot of you commented the same thing. This makes sense, but what about stress? I eat pretty clean, and my gut still feels like a disaster during hard weeks. Fair. Because food is only half the equation. Today we're going somewhere heavier. We're talking about stress. Real stress. The kind that shows up during breakups, job loss, grief, financial pressure, exams, burnout. The kind of stress that doesn't ask permission before it rearranges your entire digestive system. And by the end of this episode, you'll understand something most people never connect. Why gut problems so often explode during the hardest chapters of someone's life. Not slightly worse. Explode. Let's start with what stress actually is, biologically speaking, because most people only know the surface version. When your brain senses a threat, real or imagined, it doesn't send a polite memo. It sets off an alarm system called the HPA axis. That stands for hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal. 3 parts of your body working together, flooding your bloodstream with stress hormones. The main one you've probably heard of is cortisol. In small doses, for short periods, cortisol is actually useful. It's the reason you can slam the brakes in traffic or push through a tough deadline. It's built for emergencies. The problem is your body wasn't designed for emergencies that last for months. Because here's the part most people never learn in school. Your gut has receptors for stress hormones. Actual physical docking stations sitting right there in your intestinal lining, waiting for cortisol to show up. So when stress becomes chronic, that alarm system doesn't just affect your mood. It starts talking directly to your gut every single day, and what it says isn't good news. Chronic stress can slow down digestion in some people and speed it up dramatically in others. That's part of why stress hits everyone differently. Some people lose their appetite completely during hard times. Others can't stop eating. Some get constipated for weeks. Others can't leave the bathroom. It's not random. It's your nervous system pulling different levers, depending on your body's specific wiring. But the deeper story is what's happening to your gut bacteria themselves. Remember that ecosystem we talked about, the trillions of microorganisms living inside you? Stress hormones don't just float past them politely. Research shows that chronic stress can shift the actual composition of your gut microbiome, reducing some of the beneficial bacteria and giving more room for the less helpful ones to take over. Sit with that for a second. Stress isn't just making you feel bad. It's changing who's living inside you. And remember that gut lining we talked about, the tightly guarded border keeping nutrients in and junk out. Chronic stress can weaken that barrier, too. Scientists have found that prolonged stress may increase intestinal permeability, letting more inflammatory compounds slip into your bloodstream than usual, which means more inflammation, which means more of those inflammatory signals traveling up the vagus nerve to your brain, which, if you remember episode 2, can affect mood, focus, and mental clarity. Here's the twist nobody warns you about, though. It's not a one-way street. It's a loop. Stress messes with your gut. Your messed up gut sends worse signals to your brain. Your brain, already overwhelmed, interprets those signals as even more threat, which triggers more stress hormones, which hits your gut again. Round and round it goes, each cycle a little worse than the last. This is exactly why gut problems tend to explode during the hardest chapters of someone's life. It's not a coincidence that your stomach falls apart during a divorce, a layoff, finals week, or a family crisis. Your body isn't malfunctioning. It's doing exactly what a stressed-out gut-brain system is built to do under sustained pressure. There's actually a term researchers use for this specific pattern. It's called visceral hypersensitivity. Basically, under chronic stress, your gut's nerve endings can become more sensitive than usual, meaning normal digestive sensations, the kind you'd never even notice on a calm day, suddenly feel amplified. A little gas that would have gone unnoticed 6 months ago now feels like sharp pain. Mild fullness after a meal now feels like you swallowed a brick. This is one of the reasons people going through prolonged stress often say things like, "My stomach has never been this sensitive before." It's not in their head. Their gut's actual nervous system has, in a sense, turned the volume up. And here's something that connects this straight back to episode 1. Remember, irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, which we mentioned briefly a couple episodes ago. Researchers have found that IBS symptoms very often flare up or even first appear during periods of major life stress. That's not a coincidence, and it's part of why doctors now increasingly treat IBS as a genuine gut-brain axis condition, not simply a digestive one. The gut and the nervous system, once again, refusing to be treated as two separate stories. Let's put a face on this, because numbers only tell half the story. Meet Amir, 26, works in logistics, generally a calm guy, nothing dramatic about his life, until his company announced layoffs and his job was suddenly on the line for 3 straight months. At first, it was just tension headaches, normal enough. But by week 3, his stomach turned on him, cramping almost daily. Sudden urgency that had him mapping out where the nearest bathroom was before every meeting. He started skipping lunch just to avoid the discomfort that followed. He assumed it was food poisoning, then a stomach bug. Then he assumed he'd developed some kind of intolerance overnight. He cut out dairy. No change. Cut out gluten. Still no change. Here's what Amir didn't realize. Nothing had changed about his diet that mattered. What had changed was 3 months of his nervous system running on high alert, non-stop, with no real recovery in between. His gut wasn't broken. It was responding exactly the way an overstressed gut responds. The layoffs eventually settled. His position was safe, and within a few weeks, without changing a single thing about his diet, his symptoms started easing on their own. That's not proof of anything on its own. One guy's story never is. But it lines up almost perfectly with what the research on stress and the gut consistently shows. Now here's where a lot of health content gets this wrong, and we want to be straight with you instead of hyping you up with false promises. This does not mean every digestive issue is just stress. That's the same dismissive line a lot of people already hear from doctors who move too fast, and it's just as unhelpful as ignoring stress completely. Persistent digestive symptoms deserve a real medical evaluation because plenty of physical conditions can look and feel similar. Stress is one piece of a much bigger picture, not an automatic explanation for everything. What the science does support is this: chronic, unmanaged stress is a real, measurable factor that can worsen gut symptoms, disrupt your microbiome, and feed that loop between your gut and your brain. That part isn't controversial. It's well documented. So the real question becomes, what actually helps break that cycle? Let's go through what the research actually supports, not vague wellness advice, but things with real evidence behind them. First, the vagus nerve again. We talked about it as the highway between your gut and brain, and it turns out you can actually influence how calm or activated that highway is. Slow, deep breathing is one of the most well-studied ways to do this. When you slow your exhale down longer than your inhale, it activates what's called your parasympathetic nervous system. That's your body's rest and digest mode, the direct opposite of fight or flight. A few minutes of slow breathing won't erase a stressful week, but done consistently, It can genuinely help regulate that gut-brain communication over time. Second, movement. We mentioned this before for gut diversity, but it matters just as much for stress specifically. Regular physical activity, even something as simple as a daily walk, has been shown to lower cortisol levels and support a healthier stress response. You don't need an intense workout. Consistency matters far more than intensity here. Third, and this one surprises people, social connection. Research on stress physiology consistently shows that having supportive relationships and talking through hard periods with people you trust can measurably lower your stress hormone response. Isolation tends to do the opposite. This isn't just emotional comfort. It appears to have a real biological effect on how your body processes stress. Fourth, sleep. Again, we know we mentioned this last time too, but it deserves repeating because stress and sleep feed into each other just as much as stress and your gut do. Poor sleep raises cortisol. Raised cortisol makes it harder to sleep well. Protecting your sleep during a stressful period isn't a luxury. It's one of the most direct ways to interrupt that feedback loop. Fifth, and this connects everything back to episode 3, feeding your gut well during stressful periods matters more, not less. It's often exactly when people are most stressed that they reach for the most processed, low-fiber comfort foods, which can compound the problem instead of helping it. Nobody's saying to obsess over perfect eating during a hard week. That's unrealistic and honestly counterproductive. But even small efforts, a piece of fruit, some nuts, a home-cooked meal instead of another delivery order, can help support the ecosystem that's already under pressure. One more thing worth mentioning, because it comes up constantly in the comments. A lot of you ask about probiotics specifically for stress. Some early research on certain probiotic strains, sometimes called psychobiotics, has shown promising effects on stress hormone levels and anxiety symptoms in small studies. But the research here is still young. Results vary a lot between different strains and different people, and it's nowhere near a guaranteed fix. If you're curious about trying a probiotic, that's a conversation worth having with a healthcare provider, rather than picking whatever has the flashiest label at the store. None of these 5 things are quick fixes. None of them will instantly undo months of chronic stress, but together, they're the closest thing science actually has to breaking that gut-brain stress loop. And unlike a lot of what gets marketed as gut health, every single one of them is free. Let's zoom out, because we're now 3 episodes deep into this series, and something bigger should be coming into focus. Episode 1, we introduced the idea that your gut is talking to your brain constantly, not the other way around like most people assume. Episode 2, we went deep into exactly how that conversation happens. The vagus nerve, the chemicals, the inflammation pathways. Episode 3, we looked at how the food on your plate is shaping who's actually living inside you. And today, we've added the piece that ties it all together. Stress isn't separate from any of this. It's woven through every single pathway we've talked about. Your gut isn't just reacting to what you eat. It's reacting to your emotional world too. Your relationships, your work pressure, your sleep, your sense of safety. All of it eventually shows up in your digestive system, whether you notice the connection or not. That's honestly the whole point of this series. Not to scare you into thinking every stomach ache means something seriously wrong, and not to pretend your gut is secretly controlling your entire life either. It's to help you see your body as one connected system, instead of a bunch of separate parts that each get blamed on their own. Your stomach isn't just your stomach's problem. Your mood isn't just your brain's problem. It's all talking to each other all day, every day. If this episode connected some dots for you, let us know in the comments. Tell us about a time your gut clearly reacted to a stressful period in your life. We read all of them, and honestly, a lot of today's episode came from patterns we noticed in what you've shared with us before. Next time on Gut Whispers, we're tackling something a little different. we're going to walk through exactly what a full day of gut-friendly living actually looks like from the moment you wake up to the moment you fall asleep. No extremes, no perfection, just realistic, research-backed habits stacked together the way they'd actually work in a real life. You're not going to want to miss it. Until then, take care of your gut. It's been through a lot with you. Give it a little grace. We'll see you in the next one.